Good morning, good afternoon, and happy Tuesday, everyone. I'm delighted to be hosting our final webinar of the year on St. Nicholas Day. For the ones who do not know me and who are attending for the first time our webinars, I'm Irina Chismash. I'm head of marketing here at Castify, and I'm going to be your host for the following 1 hour. I am joined today by 4 special guests, and together we'll discuss about what happened in the customer success industry this year, and we're going to try to do some predictions for the coming year. I won't do any formal introduction for my guests because you already know them. So I'm pleased to have together here Daphne Lopes from Hubspot. I have Peter Armaly, VP of Customer Success at ESG. I have Maranda Dziekonski, Chief Customer Officer of Swiftly, and last but not least, Philip Wolf, co-founder and CEO at Castify, and also my boss. Thank you all for accepting our invitation. I'm looking forward for our talk today, and judging by the number of messages that I personally received on email, Slack, on LinkedIn, so does our audience. I want to set up the expectations. So I'm going to start, as I always do, with some housekeeping items. So I'm letting everyone know that this is a recorded event, and everyone who basically registered will receive the recording. It's one of the questions that I'm receiving. Do we get the recording? Yes, all of you receive it. And we are also posting the video on our YouTube channels and preparing a blog article with highlights and extracts from this conversation. So everyone is covered, even if you cannot join live. Also, this will be an open conversation. We won't have any formal Q&A session at the end, so please use the question tab that you have bottom right on your device. I'm going to closely monitor the questions, and we're going to address it, and we'll take them one by one, if everyone agrees. Before we start, I want to give it a few more minutes for the late joiners to attend, and I want to take the opportunity to wish happy birthday in advance to Daphne, because I know tomorrow is her birthday. So happy birthday, Daphne, from
Thank
all
you.
of us, from the whole customer success community. How are you celebrating tomorrow?
So tomorrow is a big birthday for me. It's a big milestone one. I am personally not doing much tomorrow for the day. I am having dinner with friends, but I am actually going to Brazil in a few weeks. I'm from Brazil, for those who don't know. And that is where the party is. That's where I'm getting my family together to celebrate in style. So it will be another 2 weeks until I do that. So tomorrow, just dinner.
Okay, I hope you really, really enjoy it. And once again, happy birthday.
Thank you.
So I wanna, because I know that we have a lot, and we announced a lot of topics that we wanna address. I wanna start the conversation with an icebreaker, and the icebreaker would be a poll that I'm gonna display as we speak, and I'm gonna ask the audience. Can you all see the poll? I want to ask what were your biggest customer success challenges? And we're gonna give it a few more minutes for people to basically answer. Do you see them? Do you see the poll? Okay, perfect. Yeah.
I think it's on apps, for me at least.
Okay.
She mentioned she doesn't see a poll.
She doesn't? No?
When I click on polls on just under the chat, I can find that. So I definitely see it. Oh, no, that's disappeared.
It disappeared? Okay. One sec. Don't I see it? Technology. It's the first time. Give it. One sec. Publish poll. Okay. Now you see it? Okay.
Yes, bottom right of the screen.
Okay, perfect. And you have the possibility to select multiple options. So I'm curious to see what were your biggest customer success challenges this year, and then we'll take them. But the part which I
can see the results already coming in.
okay,
32,
okay,
34.
perfect, yeah.
A lot of manual work, as it seems.
Yeah.
In combination with lack of resources, that is, of course, a challenge. As on place second.
I predict that's going to continue to be a challenge next year.
That's probably true. So the top 4 so far: manual work, lack of resources, lack of visibility, lack of prioritization and segmentation, outdated processes.
Let's give it a few more seconds, and then I'm curious to see how do you guys comment the distribution. Does it come as a surprise for you?
40 votes. 5 more seconds.
5 more seconds. We also have some no budget to automate. Somebody wrote on chat.
Ties into the lack of resource budget tools people, which is on place too.
So basically, top 3 is manual work, lack of resources, and of course, lack of visibility. Does this distribution come to you as a surprise? We also had too many battles at a time, lack of prioritization, segmentation, and some of the people also voted on aligned goals and KPIs, struggled to prove value to leadership, managing team motivation, and also bad culture.
I mean, I can start. For me, the manual work is, of course, not very surprising. I'm slightly biased, of course, because Casify is exactly basically helping with that particular part where without a proper solution and automation, manual work is taking up a lot of time with all the systems the CSM typically is in, like looking into support, looking into the own product utilization, when is the next billing. So all those tools that are there. And then sending manual emails and all those things. So for me, that one is not surprising. The lack of resources in combination with manual work, of course, is a bigger challenge, which means doing the job right is really difficult.
I think the lack of resources causes manual work. So, and this checks with what I saw in 2022 from the conversations that I've had with other CS leaders and what I've personally experienced. Budgets are tightening. And I think we're going to see that happen even more in 2023, just given the uncertainty in the economy. So I don't think this will change. However, I think that leaders that know how to build a case to show how you get, $2 back for every dollar you spend will be able to invest in the appropriate tools to bring that manual work down.
Yeah, it's all system problems. I think they all stem from a systems issue. If you have your processes are outdated, it's likely because you don't have the right systems to support you. If you don't have the visibility, it's because you're probably not using the right systems. If you're doing manual work, it's because you're lacking the systems to help you automate. So I think they all stem from the having the right systems in place. And I completely agree with Miranda. It's a matter of the ability of making a case for a budget for those systems, because those systems exist. They're out there. I think we've come far enough now in the journey of customer success that there are incredible tools out there for us to use. So it's no longer a market where you can't find the right tool. It's more the ability to secure that budget.
And I'll just add that, none of this surprises me. I've been in customer success a long time, and these are just very common themes year over year. So, I mean, that tells us a couple things, I think, is that people are still struggling to understand how to build a fully functioning customer success practice, which is a little disappointing for people like me, because we've been trying to lead this effort for a long time. We do see good examples of it. However, I also think these things exist, these themes exist because customer success has exploded in the last couple of years. And so many more companies are embracing at least the idea, the concept of customer success. And so it shouldn't surprise us that so many are starting from step one. They're not really understanding that a lot of this has already been understood, and they should be learning from experienced companies and maybe starting at step 5 instead of 1. And so a lot of companies are experiencing pain that we've all felt 10 years ago, 8 years ago, and don't understand that there's a faster way to get to where they need to get to.
Very true.
You mentioned, and I know that you've been into this industry for many, many years. For a veteran in the industry, what would you recommend to people who are seeing the same struggles? How can they build a better case? How to get the budget that they need? How can they gain more visibility? How can they gain a place at the negotiation table? What would you recommend them?
So I think a quick answer to that is to say that we all need to acknowledge the economic conditions that are happening all over the place, really challenging. And it's been said in our community, and I agree with, that you need to become best friends with your chief financial officer. I think that relationship is super critical right now. To understand what the business needs financially should dictate how you go about thinking, how are you going to architect the practice to address those considerations. We can imagine we want to continually focus on advocacy, which is obviously a noble goal. But until you put in the foundation of addressing the needs of your employer for securing and retaining revenue, the advocacy is just a dream. And so I think, really double down on developing the relationships with the senior executives who need to invest in your practice.
Yeah, I agree with Peter. I think, one of the things that all CS leaders need to shift, if they're not already doing this, is to understand how business works. Understand how to read the P&L. I know that sounds, crazy, but really understand, what are we spending money on? What are our levers? What does the business need to look like by the end of 2023 in order for us to succeed together? Instead of thinking in a silo, really look at how, customer success and sales can better partner together, or how you can leverage marketing as a tool and as a resource to drive customer engagement. There's so much that can be done when resources are tight to operate more efficiently. But I think it really starts with understanding the unit economics of your business and the levers that you have available to you as an organization to pull to move that in the right direction.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that the other piece of this is we talk a lot about scaling, right? And scaling is about breaking linear growth. And customer success organizations that are growing in the speed that we have grown for the last maybe 2 or 3 years have probably solved many problems by throwing people at those problems and just hiring more and more. So we could afford for the last 2 years to have those bad habits, but we can no longer afford that. So every story that you tell your CFO, your CEO should be anchored on how making those investments will break linear growth for your CS org and therefore make your business more sustainable. Unless you can prove that, then it's just bells and whistles. It's not necessary, it's not infrastructure. So I definitely think that looking at how a system that will enable you to stop doing manual work, make the entire organization more efficient. Like those are the kinds of business cases that you want to be making.
Daphne, I couldn't shake my head anymore. I feel like my bobblehead back here. Just like, yeah. So when I build out my forecast model, how much money I'm going to ask for next year, I specifically around headcount, I usually do it with 3 line items. So if we make no changes and just continue to use the technology that we have, this is how many heads I'm going to need to be able to support the growth that we're projecting. If I invest with ABC, this is how many heads. If I really double down and invest even more, these are the efficiencies we could potentially gain. And therefore, these are the heads that we would need. And I show the difference between, the first level, which is no investment, to the last level, which is a significant investment, but reduces headcount by X. So it's right to what you said, like we have to break those bad habits of just throwing bodies at the work. We have to get smart about it and think through what are the tools that are available to us and how do we use those tools just to work smarter.
Yeah, and I would just go a little bit further and say hiring bodies to solve this problem is actually making things worse.
Yeah,
I know that might be debatable, but I just feel like that's an avoidance strategy, and it's really delaying the inevitable that Daphne and Maranda are both talking about, the scale. Challenge.
Heaven or hell, right? That's what this is called. 2023 CS Heaven or Hell. And I think a lot of organizations, like, look, we're all seeing it. A lot of layoffs are happening right now. And to Peter's point, I think folks were a little bit heavy on hiring, a little light on building the right processes, infrastructure, using the right tools. And now investors are paying closer attention to where money is being spent. So it's forcing folks' hands to, really look at the overall structure of their organization and figure out where they can find efficiencies.
Yeah, and to Peter's point of making the problem worse is once you define that customer engagement strategy, your customer experience strategy, and is completely based on human resources, to dial back from it and completely change that experience and bring maybe digital elements to it, marketing elements, you literally resource your entire team wrong. You're short on skill sets that are needed for scale, like for example, marketing, customer marketing, automation. And then you are on the surplus for the CSM role, which is more about high touch engagement, value delivery. And it just means that shifting gears then becomes very hard, because it is then inevitably things like layoff, for example, if you hired wrong. So I think in 2023, defining that strategy of scaling is extremely important. Much more than just figuring out your headcount numbers for the year.
So what we see typically, sure, go ahead, Maranda.
No, I'm sorry. I wanted to call out just for the audience. I think one thing that we didn't do at the beginning is a little introduction about the differences in our businesses and what we own. So I come from a Series B tech startup. Usually I operate in between Series B to A. Usually under 500 people in the company. And Daphne comes from a much larger organization. And Peter, he sees everything. So we're coming from 3 very unique perspectives in where we operate and function. And I thought that would probably be an interesting tidbit for how we come to these perspectives. Sorry, go ahead, Philip.
No, I was just saying, like, my view is also slightly biased. I'm still doing like a few sales calls myself, not many, but a few, just to get exactly that kind of market feedback also. And obviously, to those that I talk to, those CS leaders typically that look for a tool, have the either they have a business case already, and there's a question in the audience also, like, how do CS people learn how to read P&Ls? One of the things that we do, for example, is helping to build a business case, because that's not always something the head of CS is like super trained in, and what numbers do I put there and so forth. So how do I make my case for this automation, for this software that can help me? So that's something that we, for example, help with. And yeah, I mean, a P&L in the end, it's a spreadsheet where we have expenses categorized in certain categories, the bigger question is typically what I see from the leadership is like, okay, what's the ROI of this? What's the ROI of this tool, for example, that helps you? So Miranda, what you said before, I'm curious. So you mentioned that you have 3 line items. One is like, we don't change anything. The third, like, you're basically 3 cases for the management to pick and decide, or for the CFO, or in the end the board to decide. And what's your experience there? Like, where do they typically go and why?
So usually the middle. So it's usually not. Usually CFOs trend a little bit on the safe side. So on the more conservative side, they don't usually do nothing, but they don't usually give me everything that I'm asking for. And that's actually why I do the 3-prong approach, because I already know that. So I already know that what I'm getting is probably the middle ask, and not the top ask. But I show, everything that we could do if we threw the kitchen sink at it, versus, what is actually probably what we could do with the resources we have, versus let's do nothing and then just throw bodies at the problem.
I'm a big fan of the 3 options too, Miranda. Psychology on the options. So you always kind of go in the middle.
Leaders love that.
Yeah, and I think
people in general like to choose, right? So
yeah, and I think some
choice.
people might think of it as a game, but it's not really a game, because it's a conversation. And yeah, sure, both parties might think, okay, we're going to land in the middle, but the conversation's worth it. I think it gives you the opportunity to explain what your vision is, even if it's not financially attainable at the moment.
Exactly.
You guys mentioned earlier about scaling, and I know that this is a very hot topic in the CS community as we speak. My question to all of you is, how do we differentiate between, because there are some leaders who consider that scaling means basically throwing everything on customer success and do more with less. So I would consider this not necessarily scaling. How do you make sure that we don't end up in this situation, and how would you teach the audience to take a step back and say, no, that's not the thing that we should cover, and this doesn't fall under scaling? Because everything can be considered, well, we are just scaling. Not necessarily.
There are a few ways that you can approach this, especially like in a smaller startup where you do tend to own a little bit of everything. One is making sure you have very clear RACI models, so that your swim lanes, your responsibility, accountable, all of that, your charts. Also make sure that you have a clear documentation of like your service offerings and customer success. So this is what customer success does. And based on all of these things that we do, these are the outcomes that we expect. And this is the headcount we need to do those. If we want to change anything or add anything, then we have to negotiate and figure out, what do we take off, or do we add heads? That's one way. Another is just continuously looking at specialization within your organization. There comes to a point, you'll get to a point to where you can no longer have your customer success managers do onboarding, CSM work, support, renewals, all of it, and you'll have to start specializing. So if you're seeing like a lot of stuff get tossed over to customer success, really look at, one, does it logically belong in the customer success organization? If yes, Great. Then 2, how do we specialize that? Is it the right time to specialize it? You just come up with a whole bunch of questions you ask yourself to make sure that this does belong here. We can support this. We should support this. And then have your ask of how you'll support this.
I think what Miranda's also kind of hinting to is the fact that you need a strategy, right? Like it's not just about just throwing customers in the customer success team. It's having strong leadership who has built a strategy for what customer success is within your organization. And I come from a company that has more than 7,000 employees, but I was in a tiny startup in the past, and no matter the size of the company I've been, a strategy has been extremely important, because a strategy it's how we win, and we make decisions based on the commitments of that strategy. If we change the strategy, the decisions we make change. So without that clear North Star of what are we trying to do, it's hard to have those conversations of negotiation, because how do you push back in the basis of what? And I think strong leadership here is important as well for modeling. We talked a little bit about like modeling, forecasting, like what is the growth path for your organization for next year, and what are you expecting to see, and is the model that we're building today building the foundations for the model that we need in the future, or is it going against what we're going to need in the future? Like, let's build upon that vision and not just work for today, work for 1, 2, 3 years down the line. So I think strong strategy and leadership is important. And it's sometimes, as CSMs, and I'm sure a lot of people here in this call are CSMs, trying to move the organization, even if it's a small one, by yourself is very difficult. You have to pair up with your leader who will build those stories, who will have those conversations, and be much more close to other sides of the business, like Miranda was saying before. So I think that also knowing what role you play in this conversation, because it is a big topic that has to be decided at the leadership level.
It's interesting. You made me think of something, Daphne. Our product teams, they never have a problem saying no, right? They never have a problem saying no because they're looking at the big picture. They see where the product needs to be 6 months, a year out, sometimes longer than that. That's how CS needs to operate. You need to operate with a good roadmap. Of course, be flexible when you need to be flexible, but have a strong roadmap to where you understand this is where the organization needs to be 6 months, a year plus out, and hold pretty firm to that and understand what that means and what that doesn't mean.
Yeah, but as long as that's underpinned by what Daphne's kind of trying to focus on, which is the strategy, I think that's true. I think that's absolutely true to maintain that kind of storyline. And I think, when we talk about scale, you have to start at defining what that means. And in my mind, and I think it's true with a lot of senior executives, scale means you're going to affect change to some extent with all of our customers. You can't just say we're going to affect change with 20% of our customers. That's not scale. And so you have to have a plan how you're going to do that. And I don't think any senior executive is going to expect you to do it tomorrow, but they do expect you have thoughts about it. You're going to plan it out. The strategy will be eventually mature and address the details that Miranda was describing. I think that's all part of scale. And 2023, I think there's no turning back. I think this is the year where scales. It starts taking off because there's no choice. There really isn't any choice anymore. And my final point is that this will inform a sea change in the persona of customer success professionals. I think the shift towards more science in customer success that many of us have been predicting for a few years is upon us now, because the tools are there, the experience is there, the expectation of other organizations for customer success to finally deliver on promise is there, and we have to deliver. And I think the only way to do that is to change the way we execute, and that will involve hiring new kinds of people, I think. more into the future.
I wanna, because you mentioned the way that the role of the CSM changes. All of you up until now mentioned about different skills that you need. I'm curious, how did your role change in the past few months? What did you need to adapt? What did you need to change so that you can fit the current economic circumstances? And what will change next year?
It's funny, I say to people that ask me about my role in HubSpot that every single year my job has been different, even though my title might not be changing, just because the company is completely changed, right? Every single year we have grown and evolved, which means that it requires me to think and behave differently. So I think one of the really important shifts that I've had to make over the last year is that we had such fantastic results in 2021 that we didn't look under the hood. We were happy with what we were seeing. And this year, obviously when the macroeconomic factors started hitting us and performance was something we were looking much closer at, I was required to just like dive much deeper into data. I mean, my background is science. I come from a chemistry background and business analytics background. So it wasn't like a new skill that I had to acquire, but it was definitely one that I had to flex and use. And then layer on top of that, the storytelling for the team so that they didn't feel like looking at performance was micromanagement, so that they felt that we were looking at performance so that we were able to hone in doing more of what works and less of what doesn't work. So it definitely felt like the year of investigation, discovery, and storytelling for me.
That's excellent. Good to hear. I just like that a lot. I think that supports what I was saying, the move in that direction. So great that HubSpot's thinking that way. That doesn't surprise me. It's a smart company, smart people. And I think we need a lot more of that going forward. So I'll just stop there because I think I'm building on a point, but I'd like to hear from maybe Philip. Do you have thoughts on that particular topic?
Well, I'm a leader of the leaders of the customer success department, but so it's a bit difficult for me to answer that one. I guess for you guys, it's a bit more interesting. What I can definitely say is to be more data driven and to be, if you are in a tech world, if you work in a SaaS company like HubSpot or Castify or any other, I guess, the needs to be also a bit more technical, not just human driven and building the relationships, definitely became more relevant. Why? Because as soon as you invest in a tool like Castify or like any other automation tool, you have to rely on the data in the end, and you are the one that has to also steer a little bit what data comes into the system. And that's one of the things, like to really understand your product and what does a customer health score actually mean, and how do we actually build that? Do people just log in and that's great? Usually not, right? Because nobody buys my product just to log in. So they do something else. So what is that, what they do? How can I build this health scoring as precise as possible? Getting back to the scaling challenge, how do I know which customer to focus on and when and why? So this is what the tool typically helps you with. But of course, the tool also relies on the input. So bad input, bad data input, bad output in the end. You can't rely on your health score. You will talk to customers that don't need to be talked to in this very moment, or the other, or worse, you miss certain things because you thought logging is enough, but in the end, logging in is not what they actually purchased you for, but something else. So long story short, I would say the need for a CSM to be a bit more technical or to be a bit more oriented also into the product world, understanding what you actually sell, like what is your sales team selling? Why do people buy your product in the first place? And not all of our customers, at least, have a extremely high touch environment where you have a QBR and you do a check-in in the beginning and tell me why did you actually purchase the product. Some of them kind of mixed touch, right? They have kind of a semi that's not sales, it's not product led, it's somewhere in the middle, where you have certain customers where you can't spend too much time with as a CSM, because simply the revenue doesn't like get you this time back. And yeah, for those, it's really important to figure out the segment of customers that really needs your help, so you can focus on those. And in order to do so, you really need to understand why do people purchase your product, how do they actually use your product, and be a bit, let's say, more into what Daphne mentioned, this like, yeah, digging deeper, like what happens actually there. And this is definitely a challenge when I talk to the one or the other CSMs, simply because where they came from is mostly relationship building and purely this like partnership, which is still very, very important, right? So it's still your main job as a CSM. But this underlying data or this underlying understanding of data is definitely something that already became more important throughout the last couple of months, I would say.
So for a guy who said he couldn't answer this question, you did a good job there. And that's why I threw that to you, Philip, because I was expecting you to kind of elaborate a little bit. And before we hear from Maranda, I just want to say my role in the last few months, I've noticed changed a lot, because all of our clients are also experiencing change with economic conditions and all that kind of stuff. And so I'm focusing on working with the senior executives to make sure they understand that the path we're working with them on is the right path, and to help them develop or have the right kind of tools available, storytelling or conversational, budgeting, all that kind of stuff, that they can continue to kind of keep their allies in the organization on board to maintain this momentum that they've been building for a while. So that's exciting. And also, finally, the webinar series that I'm running, I'm branching into adjacent kind of topics around customer success that I believe will inform the future of customer success. They be they AI or, hearing from a chief revenue officer, those kinds of, entities that need to be part of the future of customer success. Sorry, Maranda, for holding off on you so long. But
No, it's okay. This is very fascinating. And I think I've already said enough for the entire podcast or entire webinar. What has changed in my role this last year? So I've always owned or have had a portion of my performance based on, of course, my gross renewal and then my net retention. But there has been a much bigger focus on revenue in my role than I think I've ever had in my career. So doing a lot of, and just, to kind of, help folks understand what model I'm in B2B enterprise, government technology, contracts, range from a few $1,000s a year upwards of 1.2 million a year. And a lot of accounts on the larger side, a lot of accounts over $200,000 a year. So we're doing a lot of look at green space, a lot of account planning, a lot of unification of the CSM and the account manager, in figuring out what is the right motion for the organization to be able to continue the growth on the back to base revenue. This is the first time in my career, and I've been doing this for 23 plus years, that I've seen this much of a focus on this. Mm-hmm. Don't get me wrong, it's always been a focus, but we are really doubling down on this, trying to figure out what is the right model, who should own what, how much green space are we targeting, and what are we going to target, and how do we leverage, marketing and sales and CSMs to work together as a very unified go-to-market team, all of that. I mean, it's a heavy double click.
One thing I love to add from what I've heard in the conversation is I probably spent the year during the Daphne Road Tour of customer outcomes, and this is something that I think we're still so behind as an industry in. We talk a lot about health scores, for example. We talk a lot about other leading indicators like engagements and stuff, but not many companies are actually measuring if customers are getting results from what they bought. Like Philip was saying, our customers buy our products for specific reasons. They don't buy to log in every day. They don't buy to use a feature 5 times a week. They don't buy it to integrate with another product. They buy it to get an outcome. And until we are able to measure that outcome and I use a lot of the jobs to be done framework. Again, I have background in product management. That's what my master's is in it. So I'm very passionate about jobs to be done. You look at that, a framework like that, and it's like, what job are customers trying to do with our product, and how do we measure this? Like, if you're selling a promise to the customer that is, we help you increase your leads, we help you increase your revenue, we help you increase productivity, where are the metrics that you can go back to your customer to show that you are doing, in fact, that very thing? Like, how can you have a QBR and expect an executive to sit on that QBR when you don't have those metrics? It's a very difficult thing. And I think a lot of customer success organizations are still struggling with that. They don't have that number. A lot of products don't have a mechanism to measure those claims. And next year, as customers are evaluating their tech stacks, looking to consolidate, looking to cut costs, that is going to become essential. The vendors that are able to show that kind of data will win.
Yep.
Yeah, that's actually the cornerstone of our CS motion. And even in 2020, which was the worst year for public transit, we serve public transit, that's who we work with. We ended the year with 116% net retention. And I think we were at 94 gross. So we had a very strong year, even the worst year ever for public transit. And we have a very strong ROI motion. We track it, we collect goals. But it's a heavy touch. So it's very heavy touch. We collect goals and we try to make sure the goals are measurable. We track them, we present on them. And while we're doing our executive business review, we collect new goals right in the executive business review and agree that this is what we're going to work on for the next 6 months. This is how you're going to leverage our tools, so on and so forth. And then we show again and again and again that we've managed to save you X amount of hours or improve your service predictions by X amount to impact X amount of riders. So we figure out ways to quantify almost every goal that we can.
Based on what you guys are discussing, I wanted to ask if it's true or false, because it's a very debated thing. Are revenue targets basically incompatible with developing and maintaining customer trust? But based on what you said, Maranda, and also based on you said, Daphne, I'm assuming that it's a no. Why do you think that this is so contradictory or controversial, revenue targets associated with actually building and maintaining customer trust?
I mean, honestly, I would urge CSMs and CS leaders alike to stop being fearful of growing the revenue on your account. One, it's not their personal money. So you're not going out and asking somebody to write you a check out of their bank account. I know it feels weird, but it's not their personal money. Two, if you're doing your job, you're showing value, you're making their lives easier, and you know that you have solutions that they aren't using that could make their lives even easier, why not partner with them like that? If you are viewed as a trusted advisor and a trusted partner, they will want to know what are other things that you can do to make their operations more efficient, to save them money. So that's simply how I view it.
That's exactly how I see it. I think, Maranda, you and I have had this conversation, so 100% aligned on that. I like the idea of having a target because it will mollify the chief financial officer and the CEO and everybody else who expects some sort of like measurable financial return from their investment in customer success. And secondly, it ups the game for customer success to have that metric or set of metrics that they're held accountable for. I think the time is gone now where we can just argue that we are good at relationships. That's not good enough. It's not even good enough for the customers, as Maranda is saying. I think they have an expectation. If you've been working with them for a while and they do see value in the engagement, they will have an expectation that what's next? They want an answer from you that what's next, and it may involve them investing more, and they're okay with that if it makes sense for them. That's all.
Yeah. Peter, one of the ways that CSMs and CS leaders can get around this feeling like they're selling thing, create a maturity matrix, create a
Yep.
maturity model. Every time you have your business reviews, put it up there and say, look, customers that are similar to you, these are the things that they do as they move along the maturity scale of utilizing our product. You are here. This is your report card. Here are a few things you could do with the things that you've already invested in to get you here. Here are a few things that you haven't invested in that would take you here, right? They don't know
And
what
I
they
think
don't know.
there's
sometimes.
selling and selling also, right? So it's not like sales is not like it's not a black and white thing. So I guess anyone in the audience probably like got this cold call or got someone trying to sell them something that they really didn't need. Like, why would I need this wiper? I don't even have a car, right? So there's literally no reason for me to have it. In customer success, this is very different though, right? Because Miranda, you said it, like I know pretty exactly what that customer is already doing, and I know that there's other things that we have that would really help them. So as long as you sell this, as you see selling as in that, like more helping, of course it's generating revenue, of course it might be an upsell, of course maybe a bigger product line, maybe it's more support hours or product hours or service hours or whatever you have the chance as a CSM to sell. But if you see it from the perspective of helping rather than just selling, because you really know what they need, and it's not just like you don't just sell them something that they really don't need. I mean, that's probably where it becomes very difficult for a CSM to just like, if they have astronomical targets or some artificial things that they should sell with the completely different product line, which has nothing to do whatsoever with the challenges of this customer, then it becomes a challenge. But as long as this is all aligned with the company strategy and you know the challenges of this customer, I also agree that it's probably the easiest sell ever compared to someone who cold calls and first needs to find out if you have a car and then can sell you the wiper. I fully agree there.
Yeah, and also like we've been shouting and screaming for a seat on the table for years. Customer success. This has been like the first part of, let's say, of the 2010s has been spent screaming for a seat on the table, telling everybody why customer success was important, why it added value. And one of the key arguments for customer success is that customers who are healthy and that adopt the product are more likely to stay and buy more from us. Like that is the core part of the argument. So now that we have been given the sit on the table, we've been given the budget and the trust as part of the strategy of how how a company grows. Now it's time for us to deliver on that strategy, and having metrics around that is just natural. And I mean, as a CSM, you don't want to be a note taker. You just don't want to be seen as a vendor that the customer comes to and says, here's all the things that I want. Take my list, go off and find me those things and come back. You want to be a partner. You want to be an advisor. You want to be a respected party in that relationship that brings in knowledge, know-how, market information, and can give the customer the value of that relationship, that is the advice that you can give them, the nudge that you can give in terms of how other people are doing it, how other people are pushing the boundaries of whatever industry it is that your product is part of. So for your customer to see you as that strategic advisor, you need to flex the muscle of value selling, of consulting. And I think the more you run away from this, the more you are staying on the past version of customer success, the customer success 1.0, which was just about more reactive, relationship-based, kind of fending questions versus actually proactively adding value to your customers.
Well said.
I wanna, because we only have 11 minutes, and I promised the audience that we were gonna address the questions as they come, but I didn't want to interrupt the discussion. We received some questions on the chat. Noemi asked, our organization has just begun focusing strongly on end user communication to improve adoption, because half of our customer champions don't have enough support of management, and where the tool they invested in is optional. Do you see that as an important area to focus on for the next year?
So the question is providing customer information, is that right?
So the question is around, do you see that improving product adoption? Because half of the champions are basically, they don't have enough support. It's something that they should focus on. So increasing product adoption and gaining more champions into the organization is something that they should focus on next year. It's something which is important.
Sounds like it.
I was going to say it kind of depends. So I have, I've been part of 7 startups and also a company that had 35,000 employees globally, right? So I've seen all ends of the spectrum. Just because somebody's logging in every day doesn't mean they're achieving their outcomes, their desired outcomes. So you have to determine, is your product one of those products that if it passes the toothbrush test, right, they log in at least twice a day or whatever, cadence it is, that's healthy, then yes. But you have to figure out if that's the right model for your organization. There's not a one size fits all answer for this.
How do you define product adoption? I guess it goes down to that, right? Because as you say, like I can explore everything. I was there everywhere. I know HubSpot. I know all the things in HubSpot. I might never use them again. What does that mean? Is that product adoption? I get the check mark because I explored everything, or what is that, right? So it's not. I would say product adoption is not what I would look for. I would look for value, as you mentioned already. Like I would search for value. I might get super great value with 10% of your feature set and the product, and I'm super happy.
That's right.
There's no need for me to get the rest of the 90%. I'm perfectly fine. I'm a happy customer.
Yeah, I would also say do a persona mapping activity. Understand the personas that leverage your tool and what health means for them. What are their problem statements that they are solving for with your product? Also, around the question about having champions, you always need champions. I look at that as part of just like customer success 101. You should have, advocates internally. And also the individual who signs the check or gives the thumbs up on the credit card, those folks should really understand the value that your product brings, and not just once, but again and again. So they see that it's worth that line item in their budget.
Yeah, I mean, we should be honest. Has there ever been a customer who's renewed that a champion does not exist in that account? I find that hard to believe. There has to be some believer in that account. Who wants the product, right? So.
Yeah, and I do think like how you map adoption, like Philip was saying, is very important, because adoption, when done right, can be a leading indicator of retention, right? So if it's like logging into your system every day, that might not mean anything. But if you are looking at why your people are buying your product and what are the maybe 2 or 3 features that they have to use regularly in order to get that value, it might tell you information that you need in terms of like who are like really critically behind in actually being able to extract value. Because again, let's face it, nobody that doesn't use the product gets value. So you need to find some sort of adoption, but how you define it is extremely important. And I'd say if you don't have a clear picture of what that is today, or if you have one that maybe you don't believe in, I think that's really worth exploring, because it is a good leading indicator when done right.
Yep. Somebody from the audience is asking, how do you get multiple champions within a customer?
So in my experience, you find the one and you make them wildly successful. I know we talked about scale, but let's just say you've got a set of accounts and you're working with these people, you know who they are, you know the contacts. Find someone who is really interested in working with you. And if you can make them successful, so that they can then translate it in their mind that how this is going to help them in their growth path, they become your channel for broadening the communication across, and you would encourage them to do that. Not to say that here's your next step in your career, I'm going to help you get to that next level. It's more around making them feel like they're fulfilled at work and they're getting value in working with you, to the extent they want to help their peers, their teammates. And I think that's the easiest way and then they may sponsor a meeting where you have the opportunity to present to other people, and then broaden that kind of inside community inside the company.
And another great way is when the deal is signed and you're doing the handoff, and if you are an organization that does a kickoff call, to collect stakeholders right then, and folks that you could potentially work with in other groups that could benefit from this. Just do a brainstorm session. That is the time when the customer is very disarmed, because they're eager to get going and they want to get this tool up. There's that excitement. It's kind of like the honeymoon period. So it's a great time to say, okay, these are the problem statements we've identified. Are there any other teams that you think could benefit from this? What kind of problem statements do you think they would have, and who would we talk to? And and we work in an unlimited seat model, so that works super well. But it also works, we at HelloSign, we had charged seat model, and it worked very well there as well.
Another question for CS organizations that have been around for a long time. How have you maintained systems for partnership data without the tools that have been created in the past several years?
Partnership data, I'm guessing this is a partner channel that you have in the business that maybe is reselling and servicing
That's what I
customers.
interpreted
Is that what you understand?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think personally I have a biased view here. I've worked with partner models for quite some time, and I think it all needs to live in one system, right?
Yeah.
It's your CRM data. You need to have it all in there. Whether you give your partner access to a limited license to your CRM where they can use your CRM instance but not see everything in there, or whether you have a API integration with their CRM and you're pushing information back and forward. More advanced companies might have a partner portal that connects directly to the internal CRM. Whatever you do, the data needs to end in the CRM, because you need to know what's happening with those customers. They are your customers. They might be shared customers with your partner, but they are using your tool. So you need access to that information. And I think most companies will have a CRM system, and you probably have one too, Irina. So I do think it's the best place for that data.
Yeah, don't make the mistake of using a spreadsheet. I agree with Daphne.
No.
Use the CRM, because think of it conceptually as the partners just being an extension of your customer base. They need to be served just as well as your one-to-one customers.
Maranda, I think you mentioned at some point a template of a maturity metrics, and Jill is asking about that. Do you mind actually sharing it with me, and I'll share it with you?
My particular template is very specific to Swiftly,
Okay.
and it wouldn't be helpful.
Okay.
But I would be more than happy to, Jill, if you want to reach out on LinkedIn to kind of talk you through some of the ways that you can think about this. I started very simple with a good, better, best model, just thinking of peer outcomes and problem statements, and looking at it from that perspective.
HubSpot has one called the Growth Grader, which is public, and you can have a look, Jill, into that as well. It might be but it's like what Maranda is saying. It's basically just giving benchmarks based on what great looks like in your product.
Because we only have one more minute, I wanna ask all of you to give I don't like necessarily say advices, but what would you recommend for CSMs to pay a closer attention next year? What would be your recommendations for them?
I would say
make sure you're not seen as a cost center, but also as a growth engine in the company.
I +1 that. And I also say double click into your health modeling. If there are things in there that make no sense, like for example, sometimes NPS is put in a health model. I would say that's probably true for some organizations and not for others. Question all of it. Question what's in your health model, and so you can have some leading indicators to potential risks.
I would say over-rotate towards science approaches, get more comfortable looking at data, connecting the dots, telling stories, and building arguments based on data. That's going to be the future. More and more of customer success is if you can't provide the data underpinning your argument, then nobody's going to listen to you.
Yeah, and for me, I think it's relating to data. It's as a CSM, know what are your leading and lagging indicators. Leading indicators are things you can affect change immediately on that will have a positive impact on the outcome that you want to see. So whether it's retention or growth, what we call net revenue retention, like find out what drives those metrics and know what you need to do day in and day out, week in and week out in order to drive those numbers forward. You're not going to be able to control the market, the environment, the fluctuations in currency, like all those things are way outside your control. However, what activities you do every day is 100% in your hands, and figuring out what you invest in is important. I say to my CSMs, control the controllable.
Great advice. I think that's a wrap, and thank you all for a very delighted conversation. And as people are saying on chat, great insights, recommendation. We thank you all for what you shared us today. Have an awesome day, and see you all in our next webinar session.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye, everyone.
everyone.
Bye.